Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a really controversial one, Robert Greene's classic, The Art of Seduction. And let me tell you, this book looks at influence not just as some kind of skill, but as a high art form.
Now, this isn't your typical romance guide, not at all. Greene paints a picture of seduction as this really calculated psychological game. He actually argues it's the most subtle, the most elusive, and yeah, the most effective form of power out there. It's like a kind of warfare, but one that's fought in the mind, not on some battlefield.
And, Greene doesn't waste any time setting a pretty provocative tone. His whole argument right from the get-go is that love, or even just the illusion of love, makes people incredibly vulnerable. And it's that vulnerability right there that a seducer learns to navigate and, well, ultimately, to control.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll get into what Greene actually means by power. Then, we'll look at the key players in this whole dance, the seducers and their victims. After that, we'll break down the four-phase playbook, and finally, we'll tackle the book's whole beyond good and evil idea. Let's get into it.
All right, section 1. So first things first, we've really got to get our heads around Greene's central idea here. And just to be clear, this is not about pickup lines or cheesy tricks. No, we're talking about a super sophisticated form of persuasion that's working on a much, much deeper level.
So the book basically frames this whole thing as a cunning, indirect art. The goal, it's not just about getting someone to like you, it's about achieving a complete mental and emotional surrender. It's all about working on the target's imagination, right? You're trying to create a willing participant, someone who genuinely believes they're falling in love, not realizing they're being, manipulated.
Okay, so let's move on to the characters in this whole drama. According to Greene, before you can even think about influencing someone else, you've got to understand your own seductive qualities. It all starts with self-awareness. That's the foundation for any successful seduction.
So what does he mean by that? Well, he identifies 9 primary seductive archetypes. And get this, these aren't just roles you put on like a costume. They're more like natural tendencies that you learn to cultivate. And each one of these types has this core trait that creates an almost gravitational pull on other people. Pretty powerful stuff.
So for example, you've got the coquette. They're masters of that push and pull dynamic. A little bit of heat, then a little bit of coolness. It keeps their target completely off balance and always wanting more. Then you have someone like the charmer. Totally different vibe. Their whole thing is making you feel like the most fascinating person in the room by focusing all their energy right on you.
And here's where it gets really interesting, this contrast Greene draws. You see, a seducer is always looking outward, right? They're patient, they're creating intrigue, they're analyzing their target. But the anti-seducer, they're the complete opposite. They're hopelessly self-absorbed, totally impatient, and just kinda insecure. And that's why they repel people. They literally can't see past their own nose.
Okay, so we've looked inward at the seducer's type. Now the focus flips completely outward. The next step, and it's absolutely crucial according to Greene, is to identify the perfect target. And yeah, he uses that really provocative word victims to describe them. His whole point is that susceptibility is everything. So, who exactly is the perfect target? Is it just anyone? Nope. According to Greene, the perfect target is someone who has a void, a gap that you can fill. Think about it. A person who is totally happy and content, they're almost impossible to seduce. What you're really looking for is a little crack, a sense of dissatisfaction. And this, right here, is the core of the whole strategy. The theory is super simple. Everybody is missing something. Greene says that seduction isn't about forcing your will on someone. It's about finding out what they secretly, desperately want. Maybe it's adventure, maybe it's validation, maybe it's just old-fashioned romance. And then you position yourself as the person who can give it to them. The book actually lays out 18 different victim types. So you've got types like the reformed rake or siren. That's someone who's maybe settled down, but deep down they miss the excitement of their past. Or the idol worshiper, who is just searching for something or someone to be passionate about. Each one of these types points to a specific kind of emptiness just waiting to be filled. So you've got the players figured out, right? You know your archetype, you've identified your target's type. What now? Well, now you need a playbook. And Greene lays it out in a very structured 4-phase process.
And this is definitely not something you rush. It's a strategic escalation. Phase 1 is separation. You're just trying to get their attention, make them think about you. Phase 2, lead astray, is where you start mixing pleasure with a bit of confusion to get them hooked. Phase 3, the precipice, is where you really deepen the effect, push things to the extreme. And finally, Phase 4, moving in for the kill, is all about inducing that final surrender.
And each of these phases is packed with specific tactics. Take Tactic 23, master the art of the bold move. This one is for that supercritical moment, you know? Your target wants you, but they're hesitating. Green says you don't ask, you don't wait for permission, you make a bold move to just completely overwhelm their doubts.
But here's the thing, it doesn't start out that bold. A tactic like number 2, create a false sense of security, is actually key for the beginning. You approach as a friend. Why? Because it lets you lower their defenses, you can study them, learn their weaknesses, and just make them comfortable around you. So when you finally do reveal your romantic interest, it hits them completely by surprise. And that brings us to the final section, which is maybe the most challenging part of the whole book, its moral philosophy. This is where Green really asks you to suspend your normal judgment and just see seduction as a game that plays by its own set of rules. He even kicks it off with this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche: "Whatever is done from love always occurs beyond good and evil." And that really frames his whole point. He's suggesting that when you get into the realm of deep desire, of enchantment, the normal rules of right and wrong just don't really apply. It becomes this purely aesthetic game of power and pleasure.
So, the core idea here is that most people deep down don't actually want more reality. What they want is fantasy. They want play. They want illusion. And that's what a seducer provides. The book makes the case that the so-called victims are almost always willing participants. They're just yearning for someone to come along and transport them away from the boredom of their day-to-day lives. So in the end, after laying out all these archetypes and victims and tactics, the book kind of leaves us hanging with this one big question. It really forces you to think about that incredibly fine line between, charming influence and cold, calculated control. And it leaves it up to you, the reader, to decide, is this whole thing a beautiful art form, or is it a really dangerous weapon?